Today I'm going to show you guys how to find slope between 2 points. One thing that I want you guys to recall about slope is that slope is a ratio. Whoa, that was a crazy line. Let me retry that. Slope is a ratio between the rise and the run on a coordinate plane. When we rise, we actually rise on the y-axis, and when we run on the x-axis. That's going to help us remember how to do this slope formula. So speaking of the slope formula, here it is. We would say m equals, and our rise that we're going to do, of course, is going to be on the y-axis. So we would take all of our y's and we would subtract them from each other. I'm actually going to take y2 and subtract it from y1. Now when we talk about our run, we're going to subtract our x's. So we'll say x2 minus x1. So I would take my second x and subtract from it my first x. All of that to say, like these sub numbers 1 and 1, or 2 here and the 2 here, that just means that this is our first point that we see on the graph and this is our second point that we see on the graph. That's all that those little sub numbers mean. So anyway, here's our slope formula. When we do our slope formula, I strictly want you guys to do it in your calculator. So I'm going to teach you guys how to do that. So first though, let's kind of write it out so that we know what to type into our calculators. Our slope is going to take our y2, which in this case happens to be 3, it's our second y, and we're going to subtract our first y from it, which in this case happens to be 1. In our denominator, we're going to say x2, which in this case happens to be 4, and we're going to subtract our first x from it, which is 1. So in our calculator, we're going to type a vertical fraction and say 3 minus 1 is our numerator, and 4 minus 1 is our denominator. So let's go to our calculators. Here's the button that we press to get our vertical fraction. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then again, I'm going to go ahead and say 3 minus 1 as my numerator. And my denominator is going to be 4 minus 1. And when I hit enter, it will already reduce the fraction for me if it needs to be reduced. And also tell me if it's a positive slope or a negative slope. So in this case, 2 over 3, that's our slope and it's positive. So my answer to this problem is going to be 2 over 3, just like my calculator said. Let's practice another one. Again, our slope is going to have a numerator and a denominator. Our numerator in this case is going to be negative 2 minus 4. And our denominator will take our x's, so we'll take 10 and we'll minus our first x, which happens to be negative 2. So we'll go ahead and put this into our calculator. So we'll go scroll over, and I'm going to make a vertical fraction again, and I'm going to say negative 2 minus 4 is our numerator, and our denominator is going to be 10 minus negative 2. Notice I still typed the minus and the negative. They didn't cancel each other out or anything right here. And when I hit enter, my slope is going to be negative 1/2, which this one reduced for us. So I'll go ahead and answer this question and answer the slope as negative 1/2. So number 3. If you guys want, you can pause the video and try number 3 by yourself, and then push play when you're ready. But I'll go ahead and do number 3. This will be the last example that I do with you, and you're responsible for the final 7. So we'll say m equals, we'll take our second y, which in this case happens to be negative 5, and we're going to subtract our first y, which in this case happens to be 5. Then we're going to subtract our x's, so we'll take negative 8 first and subtract from that negative 4. So since I have this ratio set up, we'll go ahead and type it into our calculator. So in our calculator, I'll go ahead and hit my vertical fraction. And I'm going to say negative 5 minus 5 in my numerator. My denominator will be negative 8 minus negative 4. And I'll go ahead and hit enter, and my calculator will simplify that fraction for me and reduce it, and I will get 5/2. So my slope for this case is 5/2. So you will be responsible for the rest of these problems, 4 through 12 actually. So that's what you guys have to do in class today, as well as your slope from the other page. Some things I want to point out is what buttons that you guys push. So off to the side, I would like you guys to make a note of what buttons we used in our calculator. So in our calculator, we used that box over a box that's right next to 9. That's the button that we chose to do vertical fractions. And just a note that I want you guys to make is that even though we might be working with negative numbers, I'm going to put we, might be working with negative numbers, I still want you guys to write the minus sign. Minus sign. So if you can make that note. Sometimes we forget that, and in the future I'm going to notice it probably more. And then the other thing that I just want to mention is that if your calculator ever says undefined, let me give you an example of what undefined would look like. If I did something like 5/0, what is that? It's undefined. If your calculator ever says undefined, then that's your answer for that slope. You would just write undefined. All right, I hope that was helpful.